Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of Rimworld Odyssey and it looks like we'll jump right into the action here. Young Cat has a growth moment after turning 7 years old. Once more, since she joined us midway through, we have not reached a high growth tier with her, so we can only choose one of 3 traits, but there are 2 great options among them in Tough and Fast Learner, and after some deliberation I decided in favor of Fast Learner. We have no idea yet what her skill profile and future traits are going to be, and I don't want to push her down that tough combat path too early. Now then, time for a brief recap. In the last episode, the most important thing that happened was arguably the taming of terror kittens, the Alpha Thrumbo, currently still being tended to by our latest recruit Brent, who is fast advancing his medical skill. All the while, our 10 colonists, their various animals, and their gravship, the Hisa Mark II, are stuck in a nasty heatwave, and not only that, the ancient smoke vents on the map have also gone active, so living conditions are not exactly great at the moment, which is why we don't plan on sticking around for too much longer. After a fistfight with Saber, 20-year-old Kyla is also still recovering from her injuries. Our moral guide Reno is currently preaching health to her, which should help speed up her recovery. The rest of our pawns are busy mining steel, regardless of their skill level. Clearly, our dirt mole Saber is leading the charge, but since we're about to lift off soon, every bit of help counts. Our 8-year-old high-mate child Furion then also has little trouble carrying an entire Thrumbo, this here the 3rd and final victim of the Alpha Thrumbo's rampage last episode. At this point then, we are informed that our gravship is ready to be launched again, and so we are taking care of the last few preparations before liftoff. One of them is the construction of an orbital trade beacon and comms console. Thankfully, we have just enough space inside our storage room to fit them both in there. Our mining efforts have also brought in a decent chunk of steel, and the research of medicine production is also complete now. Time to uninstall our small research lab and pack things back up onto the ship. A few hours later then, we receive a quest revealing the location of an ancient complex on the map. We'll keep this in mind, it won't go anywhere, but for now we have different plans. Slowly but steadily, our steel is brought back to the ship and our wind turbines are dismantled, and then, once all of our cargo has been loaded, it's time to leave this rather unpleasant place behind. Now, the plan for our journey going forward is still to travel over to the side of the gravcore here. Unfortunately though, as you can see, we can't quite make it over there in one go, so I thought why not make a stop and explore an ancient garrison along the way. However, there are 2 small problems with this. Number 1, there might be hostiles, and number 2, the distance between the ancient garrison and the gravcore site is just slightly above the maximum range of our gravship. So in order to avoid having to make a second stop, we'll land a few tiles away from the ancient garrison, still inside the temperate forest, but crucially on a tile that is not foggy. So, here we are. I've picked our landing spot right next to a big patch of rich soil. I think we'll stay here for as long as it takes to harvest 1 batch of rice, just to somewhat stabilize our food supply, as our next destination will then be in the extreme desert, and even though we will likely not stay long, we don't need to take unnecessary risks. As the night falls, Kyla once again gets our research lab up and running, and a few moments later, together with Nelgraph, she can also hunt a rhino. This is something that I don't want to be misunderstood about this playthrough. As much as our colonists like to collect and study animals, at least for the moment I don't think they have any issues with also hunting them for food, although of course that may change in the future. This just as a side note because I saw some of you suggesting the animal personhood meme in the comments of the last episode, which I definitely agree would make for a very interesting addition to the series. I just don't think our colonists would make that sudden switch to no longer eating meat or harming animals, which would also include slaughtering those we actually specifically breed for that purpose. And while we're on the topic, the same actually also applies to the rancher meme, which is kind of the opposite of animal personhood. I also don't think that our colonists would suddenly decide to stop eating vegetarian food altogether, solely relying on hunting and raising animals. So I like aspects of both, but I don't like the downsides of either one. And with all of that being said, I think hydroponics makes a lot of sense as our next research project, so that we can finally grow our own food regardless of where we end up landing with our gravship. Ideally, we even do so on the gravship itself. That gravship, specifically its storage room, is now benefiting from that recent influx of steel. We're putting down some nice looking steel tiles here to increase beauty and for that lovely starship feel. In the process, Alex improves her construction skill to level 16, so we should start seeing excellent quality items from her with some regularity. In the evening then, we beauty up our laboratory. After all, we want Nelgraf and River to have a comfortable space to research in, and since of course the sun doesn't shine at night, it might also be sensible to put up 2 wind turbines. To actually get them spinning, we need to chop down a few more trees, but Kyla is already on that. And a few hours into the night, we also receive the fantastic message that Terra Kittens has made a full recovery. That is, apart from a few scars to the spine, eye and brain. Overall though, this should not impact her terrificness in any way, shape or form. Early on the next morning then, we unlock hydroponics, although it will likely be a little while until we actually build some. For our next project, meanwhile, I think we'll look into the autocannon turret. I have a feeling that turrets could play a slightly more important role in this playthrough, as they are defenses that we can mount directly onto the gravship, in contrast to the various forms of traps the game offers, which all require a bit more space. Once more then, we can watch Nelgraf and Kyla go on a short hunting trip. Unfortunately, the map does not really have any big game that would be worth hunting at the moment, but we need food, so guinea pigs, raccoons and porcupines will have to do. As Reno then starts butchering, we also receive a quest that I think with the gravship should actually not be too difficult. Somebody wants us to store some waste packs, and the rewards offered are solid, I would say. Not to mention that we're planning on leaving the map anyway, and with that the waste packs, so apart from the minor environmental destruction, I don't really see the downside. We're going to wait a little while though until we're truly ready to launch. After all, we have 8 days to make a decision. In the meantime, we can watch Brent improve his crafting skill, hopefully soon overtaking Saber as our primary crafter. And just in that moment, we also already receive confirmation the Hisa Mark II is ready for liftoff once more. But all in good time. After all, we came here in parts to explore an ancient stockpile, and Brent is currently in the process of making some flak helmets that we're going to equip our adventuring party with, and until those are ready, we're not going anywhere. Saber, by the way, has discovered another steel vein not too far away from the gravship, and I have to say this is probably one of my favorite aspects of this series with the Odyssey expansion. Yes, we are still very much on the hunt for those rare resources, but steel, wood and particularly components, the basic stuff, those are all readily available. And to me that is just a breath of fresh air after a series of series where those were always the limiting factors. It is nice that for a change we don't have to worry too much about the acquisition and can instead just focus on what to build. And Brent seems to share that mood and now throws a party for our gravship crew. And not only that, Randy also seems to be in high spirits and sends a psychic soothe our way, a stark contrast to the heatwave smoke vent environment we just left. Once the party has concluded, it is then time to form a caravan. Since it will only take us a few hours to get to our destination, we can assemble a decent adventuring party, Saber and Alex as our 2 frontline melee fighters, with Nelgraf and Kyla as the only competent gun wielders we have. We're also going to take Terra Kittens to tank and distract should that be necessary, and our bison Jeremiah will come along to haul some goodies. A short while later then, the caravan leaves the map, and it doesn't even take them 2 hours to reach their destination. However, since this is not a quest location or an enemy camp, we are not transported directly onto the map immediately. The ancient Garrison is just a feature on what is otherwise a regular map tile. Unlike with Ancient Dangers, for example, it is not a map built entirely around this feature. Long story short, in order to plunder this garrison, we need to make camp on this tile, which has our small caravan start off in the middle of the map, the ancient garrison, clearly this building here, in the lower right corner. There are essentially 2 ways of getting inside. First, we can simply deconstruct the regular walls and doors, or we can hack these special ancient blast doors. What eventually ends up being the better approach largely depends on what we find behind. In this case, Nelgraf opens the blast door and immediately gets shot at. At the far end of the corridor here, 2 ancient turrets still seem to be active, with a second one being positioned in the other corridor leading left to right. Over on the western wall then, we crack open the door to reveal a room containing 2 cryptosleep caskets, and with potential hostiles inside, we are not going to crack these open just yet. Instead, we keep exploring and find a survival meal pallet, inside of which Alex and Kyla find 18 packaged survival meals. Nelgraf and Saber, meanwhile, work on a breach to the north, which reveals a very similar pallet, just 10 meals in this one though, and the room to the left is empty. There is, however, a hunter trap here that we want to stay far away from. You'll see why in just a few moments. The fourth and final room in this quarter of the facility then sadly also empty. The crates here don't contain anything. So we continue in the southwestern parts, where Alex and Kyla stumble upon another turret. And speaking of turrets, good timing here, the autocannon turret now also fully researched. The next room here then full of guns, including one that will unfortunately shoot us if we enter. Eventually, though we want to do so, there are a few here that we definitely want to grab. For now though, we keep looping around the outside of the facility, avoiding any turrets in the process, and we are rewarded with another survival meal pallet in the southeastern corner here. After grabbing and munching on its contents, only this room to the northeast here remains unexplored, and this one contains 2 chem fuel canisters and 2 sealed crates, but also a hunter trap that we better disable before going in. And this is where Alpha Thrumbo Terror Kittens now enters the picture. With a quick change of zones, the hunter trap is triggered, and even though Terror Kittens does not stand and fight, that is actually all we wanted, as it gives Nelgraf and Kyla enough time to fire a few rounds. And so the drone explodes and we can help ourselves to the valuables, unsurprisingly chem fuel from the chem fuel canisters and EMP shells from the other 2 crates. At this point then, we still need to disable that turret guarding the weapon room, and we are hopefully going to do so by breaking down the 2 sections of wall right next to it. That way we will have enough space for Saber and Alex to both launch melee attacks, and the risk of Nelgraf and Kyla accidentally hitting walls and not the turret remains low. Now let me be the first to say that this method is certainly not perfect. It is very likely that we are going to take some damage in the process, but I'm optimistic that the turret is only going to fire 1 volley before we take it down. And there we are. Some pretty nasty gunshot wounds on Alex, to be honest, but the turret is defeated, and with that our access to a plethora of guns is clear. Kyla will now pocket what I deemed worthwhile, while Nelgraf patches up Alex's injuries, and then, after clearing a firing angle at the 2 cryptosleep caskets, we quickly leave the room. At this point, the plan is simple: shoot the caskets, see what pops out, and retreat if necessary. And since these 2 here definitely do not seem friendly, and one of them has also triggered a shield, I think it's best if we just wait for them to come to us. Now once again, this unfortunately puts Alex at the risk of taking even more injuries, but I think in a 4-on-1 assault we should have this one in the back before anything bad happens. And indeed, enemy number 1 is defeated and Alex did actually not suffer any further injuries. Enemy number 2 is already incoming though, so let's see how that one goes. Alright, now I may not have played this perfectly with the way the game's pathfinding works. Alex did also take a few additional cracks and bruises, but once more, Nelgraf won't have any issues patching those up, and we can help ourselves to a bit more loot from our enemies, including a suit of marine armor to replace Alex's recon armor. Both are tainted, but with the bloodlust trait she won't mind either way, but the marine armor is a bit more protective and also in better condition. And with that, we can now use the caravan hitching spot next to Jeremiah to plan our trip back home. We have already packed everything of interest, so I think we'll see our adventuring party back at the gravship in a few hours. As they return, that gravship is also already being worked upon once more. Just a slight expansion this time though. I think we're going to see the first larger scale overhaul once we have acquired that gravcore. At the machining table, meanwhile, Brent has switched from flak helmets to shield belts. Those 2 will greatly benefit our melee fighters. One of them, Alex, is still currently injured and resting in the hospital, so we are once again having Rhino preach health to her in the hopes of a swift recovery. Our gravship expansion then also moves 2 batteries out of the sleeping quarters, and crucially, for any future exploration in space, we put in place a vac barrier to keep the vacuum of space outside and air inside the gravship. We still have a door behind it though for security purposes. The vac barrier only stops air, not enemies. Finally, we're also adding some turrets to the front of the gravship, just 4 mini gun turrets for now, but the setup may increase soon, all hooked up to switches for convenient activation. And yes, I am very much aware that turrets can explode and we have batteries nearby, but as with all things gravship, this is likely not a long-term setup, and we are only going to use it if the situation is right. Now at this point, the trigger-happy Brent has joined our lineup of gun users. He's not particularly good at it, but joins the hunt for a mega sloth here. Once again, an animal that I would have loved to tame, but right now we need the food a bit more. To add to any potential future defensive setup, we are also going to start the research of mortars now, and with the beginnings of a rice harvest being brought in, our stay here on this tile is slowly coming to an end. Coming to an end is also the Psychic Soothe, perhaps one more sign that we should pack things up and leave soon. Before we do though, we upgrade our rec and dining room, replacing the chest with a poker table. We can also watch as Kyla and Nelgraf do a little bit more hunting. After a few days of waiting, we finally have some animals on the map that are worth the effort, and their skins will be useful in the construction of a few more armchairs for our rec room, which is slowly approaching the territory of being deemed very impressive, all of that while being confined to the tight spaces of our gravship. This is, by the way, another aspect of this expansion that I hugely enjoy, this pressure to maximize every last inch of space. There's just something very rewarding about these incremental upgrades to the ship, and it never really feels like you stop making progress. In the evening then, mortars are done, and I think from focusing on defenses, let's focus on upgrading and improving our colonists. Prosthetics might be a suitable project to complete next. River and Nelgraf should have this done in no time. The rest of our stay here on this tile then is a story quickly told. Saber has discovered a few more veins of compacted machinery, and we're also giving our sleeping quarters a quick overhaul. With the newfound space, we can now construct some walls and a door, and as a result, our pawns will now no longer have to walk through the room when accessing storage, which, especially at night, was the cause for a few disturbed sleep mood penalties. We have apparently also been on this tile for long enough to witness a few animal births. Unfortunately though, none of them will survive for too long. The extreme desert is certainly not the place where we want to bring extra mouths to feed. With the completion of prosthetics then, we have another useful research project in the books. In order to unlock bionics then, we first need fabrication, and I think we have postponed that for long enough anyway. So let's get on it. This will keep our researchers busy for a while. With Brent quickly improving his crafting skill, now already at level 12, we then also receive a visit from the Royal Tribute Collector. But once more, we have nothing to give. In fact, what we do next might actually harm them, because as you can see, we are in the last stages of packing up the gravship, and so just a few hours later it's time for liftoff. Our guests are politely asked to leave the ship. Some of them do so in the middle of having a meal inside of our dining room, so I guess those meals now belong to us. For our destination then, we use the full 400 chem fuel stored in our tanks. Once more, the site of the ancient stockpile containing the gravcore is in the extreme desert, a biome that, well, we're not entirely unfamiliar with on this channel. And so here we are, in the middle of the extreme desert, and unsurprisingly there's not much going on. The ancient stockpile then, to the south of our landing site, with 3 separate entrances, all of which will need to be hacked to gain entrance. While we explore, we can perhaps also mine some silver and uranium nearby, but all in all we are not planning on sticking around for too long in this hostile environment. And with that, I think we have reached a good point to make the cut for today. I am happy to report that once again we have some fan art this week. Our contributors, Tony Murchison and that guy Furion. The first 2 pieces here, both of course about the Alpha Thrumbo, which I foresee will have a fantastic future in this series. The third piece here then shows Nelgrav, who seems to be a secret fan favorite, always rambling on about the void, but also one of the few people in our colonist capable of shooting things. So thanks again to the both of you for enriching this video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can also subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or become a channel member or Patreon supporter. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.